Okay, so we're on. I'm going to share the screen here with the PowerPoint. So quicker one this time. We're just going to look at the strengths of the pieces. So which ones are worth more? Because as you go through a game of chess, you need to learn to calculate, you know, do I want to take that one? And if I take that one, my opponent's going to take that one, and work out generally who is coming off better from exchanges and captures. So let's have a look at how we do this. So what we tend to do in chess is assume that a pawn is worth 1. It's the weakest piece, so it makes sense to use it as the basic unit. And so we work out all of the rough scores, approximate scores, values from the basis that a pawn is worth 1. Actually, you'll sometimes find that a book might say a central pawn on the D or E file is worth a little bit more than 1, but it's just easier for now, while we're learning, to just say a pawn is worth 1. And there it is. So the knight next. Most experts would agree the knight is worth about 3 pawns. And similar with the bishop, about 3 pawns. Now, usually, in practice, in real chess, a bishop is actually a little bit stronger than the knight, usually, because it can get from side to side more quickly. But there are exceptions where you'd rather have the knight than the bishop. Generally speaking, though, if you calculate that they're worth about 3 each, you're not going to go far wrong as a beginner. Then the rook is the next most valuable piece, and we'll say it's worth about 5. Then the queen, of course, we say that the queen is worth about 9. And so you get these different balances. So if you have a rook and a bishop taking on a queen, it's 8 against 9. So the queen would usually be a little bit better. If you had 2 rooks playing against a queen, you've got 10 against 9. 2 5s are 10 against 9. So again, you'd slightly prefer the rooks. But all of this is just a guide. What's actually on the board can change these things a little bit. It just gives you a pretty good idea of whether it's worth taking a piece or not. But generally, what you're not going to want to do, the very rare exceptions, is lose your queen for a pawn or lose your queen for a rook. Because the queen is so much more powerful than those that you really don't want to be losing her for very little compensation. And if you do that, you do lose your queen or you do lose a piece at higher level chess, the game's as good as done. Certainly between top grandmasters, even losing a pawn can pretty much mean that the game is done. The king is priceless. And we say that because, of course, if you lose the king, you've lost the game. But in an endgame, when you start to bring him towards the middle of the board, because he's not likely to get checkmated, then his rough value in fighting strength is about the same as a bishop or knight, so about 3. But I'd say he's really priceless, because if you lose him, you've lost. So let's look at some positions and try to work out roughly who we think is ahead and why. So this is a really easy one to start with. Both sides have a king, both sides have a queen. White is obviously a pawn up, because you can see without much counting that that's the case. But in terms of points, we've got 9 and the 2 pawns, so that's 11 for white, and 9 for the queen plus a pawn, 10 for black. Fine, so white's a pawn up, and it would be difficult between grandmasters, but would probably win that because of the pawn. In this one, we've got for white 6 pawns, plus 5 for the rook is 11, plus 3 for the knight is 14. Black's got the 6 pawns, plus 5 for the rook is 11, plus 3 for each bishop. So that's 14 and 17. So we can say here that black is a piece ahead. You could call it 3 pawns if you really wanted, but it's a piece up, okay? Because one of the bishops cancels out the knight, and then there's an extra bishop. So black is said to be a piece up. And that really, once you get beyond beginner level, should be enough to win the game. And this one here, we've got 2 white rooks, so that's 10, all 8 white pawns, which makes therefore 18, plus a knight, plus a bishop, so that should be 24. And then we've got 2 black rooks, so that's 10, all 8 pawns, 18, plus a bishop, 21, plus a knight, 24. So the position's dead level, and I'm pretty sure there's a typo on my PowerPoint. Yeah, I thought so. It says 20. Of course, it should say both sides have 24. It doesn't matter. The point is the position is absolutely dead level. And with best play, it will just be a draw. Oh, I say that. Of course, if it's white to move, you can play bishop takes c7. But in terms of material, it's currently dead level. This one that's just come up now, we've got 2 white rooks, so that's 2 5s are 10, plus the 3 pawns make 13. A black queen is 9, plus the 3 pawns are 12. So we got 13, 12 to white. But I suspect, again, the 2 grandmasters might well look at that and decide that the best that can be had is a draw with best play. Very, very, very tiny edge for white at 1 pawn. This one, we've got for white 6 pawns, plus 5 for the rook, so that's 11. And black has 6 pawns, plus 3 for the bishop is 9, plus 3 for the knight is 12. So we'd say black is a pawn up. 11 to 12, it's a tiny edge. This one is interesting. We've got 5 for the white rook, plus the 4 pawns makes 9. Black has 3 for the bishop and 3 for the knight, so that's 6, and the 3 pawns, so that also makes 9. So although we can say that it's equal, it's actually a really difficult position to know who's winning, because white has that pawn on c4, which is called a passed pawn, and that means there's no enemy pawns on the 2 files next to it. You can see there's no black pawns anywhere near it to stop it going forward. So it's potentially a queen. It's very, very dangerous. But on the other hand, black does have a bishop and a knight. So it's a tricky one to know who's winning. It's an imbalanced position, even though the points are 9-all. It's imbalanced. Let's try another one. So we've got a situation where it rather depends whose turn it is. If black is playing here, he's winning comfortably because he's got 8 against 4. Let you work out why it's 8 against 4. And he'd play his rook across to a4, so that when white pushes his pawn forward, he loses that new queen straight away. But if it's white to play, even though he's 8-4 behind, he'll move his pawn to a8, get his queen back with check on the black king, and when the black king moves, the white queen, the new white queen, will take the rook, and then suddenly the score has become 12-3. So it's a very dramatic example, but just because you are behind doesn't necessarily mean you are completely done for. Okay, that white pawn is really worth a heck of a lot more than 1, isn't it? Because it's so close to the far edge of the board that it really is a strong piece. What have we got with this one? Let's have a count. So we've got 7 white pawns plus a bishop, so that's 10. And 7 black pawns plus a knight, so that's 10. But is it really that straightforward? Have a look at this white bishop. What can it do? Nothing. It's completely trapped in by his own soldiers. He's what's called in chess a bad bishop. And so a bad bishop is one that is hemmed in by its own pawns, that it becomes trapped. It has its mobility restricted and isn't a very useful piece. Whereas the black knight is free to act. And so what's really happening in this position is on the king's side, which is the E, F, G, H files, black's actually a piece up. He's a whole knight up and should win the game. Okay, and that's just because that white bishop is totally and utterly blocked. It can never, ever, ever escape from that side of the board, unless black does something absolutely unforgivably stupid. It's never going to escape. So actually, black is winning. So yes, we need to learn to count up the points, but we also need to just think about what else is going on the board that might adjust these scores. So one thing that you guys can do, it's a really good idea, is to set up games that aren't quite the full armies. So what I mean by that is you put your 8 pawns on and your king for each side, of course, but then try different combinations. So perhaps have 2 white rooks against the black queen, or you might have the 2 white rooks against black would perhaps have his 2 bishops and a knight. Or you might say maybe you'd have white would have the queen and black would have 2 knights and a bishop. Things like that, so you'll get the hang of all these different combinations of values. We've often said that bishops are a little bit better than knights, but sometimes you'll find that when it's queen and bishop against queen and knight, sometimes the queen and knight work better together than the queen and bishop. So you can try all these miniature games with different combinations of values to see what's going on. And a really good way to practice if you're playing a much stronger player than yourself is to ask them to start with certain pieces missing. So if I'm playing a complete beginner, I might well take the queen and a rook off the board and give them a big head start. Maybe if it was much, much closer, I was playing someone a little weaker than me, but close, I might just take off one of my pawns. Or if I was playing the world champion, then although I'm quite a good player, I would think Magnus Carlsen could probably take one of his knights off the board and be able to cope with playing against me with a knight odds of a knight, as we call it, odds of whatever piece. So try to do that. But for now, I'm going to have a quick game against the bot. So I'm just going to stop sharing that one and share a different one. Hopefully, play versus bot. I'm going to put it on the absolute easiest level. Okay, and we're just going to watch as it loses pieces and do some counting. So everything is still on the board here. And I'm going to start with a center pawn because that's always good. It lets my bishop out, it lets my queen out, it holds the strong center of the board. His move is okay. So I'm going to develop my bishop. He's developed a knight, it's fine. I don't think he's bad enough to fall for scholar's mate if I play queen to h5, is he? We could find out for Giggle. All right, no, that's not the right move to play. Let's play the right move. So the right thing to do is occupy the center. Okay, so now he's played bishop to e6. This is great because it gives me a chance to explain tactics. So what I'm going to do now is push the pawn forward. And the reason for that is that it attacks two pieces at once, which is called a fork, and guarantees that I'm going to gain 3 points and I'm only going to lose 1. So watch how this happens. So push the pawn forward. I'm attacking both pieces. And he can't escape. He can't defend them both. I suppose he could have played knight there, bishop across. I'd have had check. Actually, he possibly could have defended it with a tactic, as it turns out. But the point is, it's a fork. He's not bothered to try that. So now I get to take one of his pieces. I'm going to take his bishop, which is worth 3. And he hasn't even bothered taking me back, which is strange, but then it is the weakest level on the computer. But had he taken me back, I'd have taken him. So I'm currently a piece up. I'm going to take that one. So now I'm 4 points up. Okay. And I think we're starting to get the idea. So you count all of these up and you can see I've got an extra bishop worth 3 and an extra pawn. So I'm 4 points ahead here. I'm a piece and a bishop ahead. And the game is as good as dead. I can play a few more moves, I suppose, but let's just see what happens. Okay, let's just keep developing pieces because that's how we do things in chess. Now his king's stuck in the middle of the board. He can't castle. So I think what I'm going to do here is try to open up the middle of the board. He'd run away with his knight, which is pretty sensible. I'm going to go there. Taking it with that. Okay. Bishop's pinned, which might be quite useful for me. So I don't need to castle yet because there's no attack. So I'll put the knight there. We're going to do a swap now. So I'm gaining 3 if he takes me back with the pawn, which I assume he will. He didn't, okay. But if he takes me back with the pawn, he'll get 3. So you can see what's going on here. Obviously, the computer is well on its weakest level. We'll do a little tactic here. So the queen and the king are on the same line. It's an X-ray. So what I can do is a discovered check. So when I move the knight, the queen will be checking the king. And this will actually give me a chance to win his queen. So I'm just going to put that there. Now he has to escape the check. And when he does, I can take his queen. But that's an even worse move because now I can play queen takes knight. It's still check. And he still has to escape, and I still get his queen. Okay, and by now you can count up the points. So what have I got? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pawns. The 2 rooks are worth 10, so that's 17, 20, 23, 26, 29, and a queen, 38. And black's got the 2 rooks, so that's 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. So you can see I'm 19 points up. It's a dead game now. I'm not going to waste any more time on that. So that's today's thing done. Count pieces, work out who's winning. If you're going to take somebody's piece, can they take you back? Try to not be losing your strongest pieces for weaker pieces. And the very first thing you should be doing on every single move before you do anything else is, are any of my pieces threatened and under attack? And if they are, does it matter? Are they defended? Before you play any move, imagine that you've put the piece on the square you're considering, and does it change anything? Is that piece then under threat? But the first thing you really need to do when you're beginning out in chess is just don't give away pieces. Don't concede, give away, lose strong pieces for weaker pieces. It's the main thing to do as a beginner player, is don't be just losing your pieces. Check that they're safe, check that they're protected, and of course check to see if the enemy has left any of their pieces open to capture. Okay, I think that will do for today. We'll stop the share on that one. Fantastic. Thanks very much.